Hi bag builders and sewing chums, thanks for joining me. It's Diane from Spencer Og Sewing Patterns. If you like today's tutorial, please do subscribe to the channel. There's always lots more content on here, and I also have a Facebook sewing group for help and support with my patterns and lots of daily sewing and bag making chat. Today I'm here to share with you my new tutorial for the Sanitizer pod. It's a pouch to hold hand sanitizer that you can hang inside your bag. It holds various sizes. You can make it with or without a flap, your choice. And it has a lovely strap that you can elongate, so you can hang it inside your bag, hang it from a belt loop, even use it as a lanyard. It's a really easy sewing pattern, it's fully lined, and it's suitable for domestic sewing machines. So there's quite a lot of hand sanitizer sewing patterns out there. The difference with this one is that it doesn't have a hole to put the neck of the bottle through. It's actually a pouch with a flap. The members of my bag sewing group specifically asked me to make this pattern because they wanted something that they could clip onto the inside of the bags, and you could drop the bottle into it. The flap holds it securely if it's being jiggled around in your bag upside down, but you can also make it without the flap. It will hold various handbag size bottles of sanitizer. I had to hunt high and low for lots of different sizes to see what the best pattern size would be. So it'll hold the round ones and the flat ones, sort of 30 to 60 mil in general. But I also show you at the end of this tutorial how to change the shape or the size really easily. I've made the pattern so it's dead simple to do. So there's printable pattern pieces for it, so just check the text below with how to download it. It's fully lined, so it's really easy to wash. It's interfaced so that it is really durable, so you can sort of hand wash it or throw it in the washing machine regularly. The swivel or trigger clip on the top means that you can attach it to a bag easily, either to a loop or a handle, and just have it hanging on the outside of your bag. You could have it hanging lower on the inside of your bag, just attach it to the straps and have it hanging inside. I don't know if you can see that. You could also attach it to a belt loop and have it hanging from your trousers, or I give you dimensions to make a lanyard style loop as well, so you can have that hanging around your neck. It's made from regular quilting cotton, so you can wash it regularly, but you can also make it from cork or any other fabrics you'd like to try. It's also great for men. Husbands had this one already. Made this one in ripstop. Again, no interfacing in that one whatsoever. Yeah, as I say, nice and rugged looking, and because it's for a man, I call that one a manitizer. You could even go as far as making one to match your mask. We've all got to carry them these days. So this version is for a 30 to 60 milliliter bottle of hand sanitizer. You can easily adapt it. That's up to 4 inches high, but you can really easily adapt it to a larger bottle, and I'll show you that at the end of the tutorial. You can also adapt it for lots more uses. I realised as I was making it that, oh yeah, I could do with one of those for my glasses, or I could do with one of those for my USB stick. So a million uses. You can use it for your earphones, hygiene products, great for a doggy poop bag, because I'm using one already, bright yellow. Medicines, tissues, and as I say, hang one from your belt, and it's really useful if you're out and about and you don't want to carry a bag, and it's great for men because they love that, don't they? They don't really want to carry a bag. So just follow the tutorial to the end and I'll show you the adaptations there. It fastens with a magnetic clasp because I thought that was easier than messing with a popper, but you can exchange it for a cam snap or even a little bit of Velcro. There is a trigger hook or a swivel clasp on the strap, which again is great for hand washing, but if it's something you want to throw in the washing machine at high temperatures daily, then you could also exchange that for something more durable like a piece of Velcro. You could put a button loop on there, or even extend the strap and just put a cam snap on there too. So just download pattern pieces, follow the link below, and just underneath the video in the text is the link to the pattern pieces. So what are you waiting for? They're loads of fun, really quick, and actually I can see millions of uses for them. I'm going to be carrying them all the time. So great fun. What are you waiting for? Go sew. So we don't need many supplies to make this item. Just a few scraps of quilt weight cotton or other lightweight fabric, some fusible interfacing, medium weight, something like a Violin 220 or woven fuse. We need a lobster clasp, 3/4 inch, or a trigger clasp, and a small magnetic clasp. I've used a 15mm here. But really anything you've got in your stash is fine. You could substitute that for a little square of Velcro or even a cam snap. So print off your PDF pattern sheet and cut your pieces accordingly. There's just 3 pieces there and they all fit onto the one sheet. Check your 1 inch check square does measure 1 inch before you start cutting your fabric. So I've gone ahead and cut mine out already. I have 4 pieces of piece A, so 2 outer fabric and 2 lining fabric. So I've cut them in 2 different fabrics. You can use the same fabric if you wish. 2 pieces of piece B for the flap, and I've cut 2 in the outer fabric, but again you could use 1 outer and 1 lining, and 1 piece C, which is the strap, and again I've cut it in outer fabric. So you also cut 2 pieces of fusible interfacing, to which I fused those to my 2 outer pieces. 2 pieces of fusible interfacing for flap B, and again I've fused both of those. And for piece C, you can either interface the whole thing, or I've actually just, bearing in mind keeping the layers down, I've just actually interfaced half a bit along the centre. If you've got an industrial machine, you've got no problem with layers ever, but if you're using a domestic like I do, I'm always conscious of keeping the layers to a minimum. In terms of the interfacing, you don't have to interface it if you don't want to. It's great if you're going to be washing the item a lot, because you can throw it in the washing machine. It makes it more durable and it'll last longer. You don't have to, as I say, it's a little flimsier if you don't, but if you could make it in a ripstop or something similar, there's no interfacing in that whatsoever, and that'll be more durable anyway. So the choice is yours, really. Again, you could interface the whole thing if you wanted to. That'd also make it into a more sturdy case. So your seam allowance is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch all the way through the project, unless otherwise stated. So first I'm going to apply my magnetic snaps. Now you can substitute that for a small square of Velcro if you want, or even use a cam snap at the end, but I'm going to use magnetic snap here. So I'm going to apply 1 to one of the flat pieces and 1 to one of the outer body pieces. So grab your flat pieces, choose whichever you want as the outer, whichever you want to see on the front, choose the other one. So I'm going to choose this one for my underneath side of the flap, flip it over and place it so the curve is to the top, a short curved edge. Now I've applied a little circle of strengthener there already. I've used a little piece of Decaville that I've just fused, and that's purely to strengthen behind the clasp. Now I want to attach my clasp 3 centimetres or 1 1/4 inches down centrally from the top. So I'll just make a mark. You can kind of fold it in half to see where the central point is, and then just measure down your 3 centimetres. Or 1 1/4 inches. So that's there. So let's attach our male part of the clasp there. So that's the piece with the little sticky out bit. That's why they call it a male. I'll use my washer as a template. Obviously I'm marking this with a ballpoint pen so you can see it. Use something that disappears nicely. Snip through there. You can use small scissors. I just usually use a seam ripper. If you're worried about going too far, just put a pin across the end before you start snipping. Make sure they've gone straight through. We don't want any pulls on the front. You'll often find you get a pull on the front because you haven't cut all the way through. and then you try and push the prongs through and it'll pull the fabric. So just make sure it's pushed all the way through. There we go. Flip that over and washer on. And I usually use a metal ruler to push those out. You can push them to the sides or you can push them to the centre, whichever you choose. So that's one part attached, and now I want to attach the second part, the female part, and I'm going to attach that to one of my outer pieces. So that's one of the interfaced pieces. Choose which you'd like for the front of your pod. So I'm going to choose this one. And again, I've already attached a little piece of Vilene there. Sorry, not Vilene, a little piece of Decaville there. And I want to attach that 4 centimetres down on this side, or 1.5 inches. So again, I'll just fold it in half and mark a 4 centimetre mark. I'll use my washer again as a template. Snip that through. And attach the other side. If you are using a directional fabric, by the way, make sure that it's sitting in the correct direction when you look at it. That's going to be at the top of the pouch. Flip it over. Attach my washer, trusty metal ruler, and that's our snaps attached. Obviously, I said at the beginning, you don't have to attach the flap at all. You can just use it as an open pouch. So if that's the case, just leave the flap out completely and leave the poppers out. You don't need to attach those at all. Now next is, if you wish to attach a badge, as I've done in this one on the flap, and I've done here on the lower part, you can attach it to either now. So you can take the body and attach it low down on the body. So I'd say about 1 inch up from the bottom, essentially. Or if you want it on the flap, take your other flap, not the one with the popper on, and attach it to the flap, if you prefer it on there, about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom, essentially. So that's 3/4 of an inch up from that curved edge. So I'm going to attach my badge today to the outer part. So I'm going to centre that on my board. I'm going to attach it 1 inch from the bottom centrally. So using the board to guide. A little bit of double-sided tape doesn't go amiss. I'll just measure that's right. Fraction that way. There we go. So I'll just take that to the machine and I'll top stitch all the way around that badge. So I'm using a Janome Atelier today to sew on. I've got a number 14 needle on it, and I have got a walking foot on it, but you don't need one at all for this project. It's a nice easy sew. When you're top stitching, if you're not 100% sure of getting a straight line, you can use a guide, or you can use a blind hemming foot, which most machines come with. I'm always extolling the virtues of a blind hemming foot. So you just put that onto your machine, snap it on, and move your needle slightly to the left, and that will give you a nice close and even top stitch. So let's stitch this on. So we'll just lay that to one side now. And now we're going to work on our flap. We're going to make our flap. So you've got your 2 flap pieces, and we've attached our magnetic clasp to one. I'm going to stitch those together, right sides together, line them up, and we're going to stitch with our 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around the 3 sides, leaving the top straight edge open. So we're going to be stitching the two curves. Now, if you're not comfortable with sewing curves, you can draw it on before you start, and it makes things so much simpler. So I've done it here. Just draw on your 1 centimetre seam allowance along those 3 sides, and then I've used a coin just to mark out those corners, and then you'll have a nice guide to sew against. It doesn't matter if the curve is exactly as the outer curve is, as long as you've got a nice curve on it, it won't make any difference. So we're going to put those right sides together, clip them in place, make sure they're nicely lined up. And we'll stitch around those 3 sides, leaving that top straight edge open. Back stitch beginning and end. There we go, and now I'm going to trim that down. You can clip the curves, or you can use a pair of pinking shears, which is much easier. So you get nice and close to that stitch line. We'll turn that through. You can use your finger, it's not a really deep item. So push that out nicely, and then I'm going to take that to the ironing board, and I will get my tool and I'll press that nice and flat. So that's our flap done. That's complete, but you've got the option of top stitching around that, so I'm going to top stitch it just to finish it nicely. Again, use your blind hemming foot if you wish. There we go, and then I'm going to trim that up. Keep trimming at every stage, and then you're not faced with hundreds of thread ends on your finished item. Much easier to do it now. Okay, and then we're going to move on to making the strap. So strap piece C, I've taken that to the ironing board and I've pressed it in half along its length, opened it out, pressed the sides in to meet that central crease, and then folded it in half again to enclose all the raw edges. And now I'm just going to top stitch 3mm or 1/8 of an inch all the way around the whole thing. Snip your thread ends as usual. And there's our strap completed. So grab your lobster clasp or trigger clip, and we're going to fold that over. So I've just threaded that onto there, fold it over to enclose it. Now in this one we're not going to lay it directly on top of each other, we're going to open up the straps so they're lying separately at the ends. So we're going to grab our flap again, place your flap down so your popper or your snap is underneath, and then we're going to lay our strap on top with our edges spread open. So just position the point of each strap on the top point of your flap. Same on the other side. So you can see I've positioned that so you have got the points of the corners of the flap and the points of the strap meeting at the outer edges. Get a little bit sticking up in the middle, we'll trim that off afterwards, that's fine. And I'm just going to baste across the top of there to hold it in place. So a couple of points here, make sure before you attach your trigger clasp or your swivel that it is big enough to attach to your handbag strap or the ring on your handbag, whatever you want to attach it to. And the other thing is, you don't need to attach a clasp at all. You can extend this strap and use it as a lanyard, or you can extend that strap and just have it with a popper on the end so you can wrap it around anything you want. So let's baste that into place. So we'll baste across the top within the seam allowance, so that's less than the seam allowance of 1 centimetre, so it doesn't show after stitching the seam. There we go, just trim those threads, and then we're going to trim down the top edge of the strap to match the line at the top of the flap. So you can see there's just those little points sticking over in the centre. So you just want to trim that so it's even and straight with the flap. There we go, and there's our strap and flap completed. And remember, you can extend that strap if you want it to about 38 inches to make it into a lanyard without the clasp. That's always handy too. And now we're going to attach that to our body. So grab your pieces A again, and we want the outer body piece that is the back, so it's the one without your clasp on, without your badge on, so just the plain one. I'm going to take the strap and flap, and we're going to lay that face down so your strap is sandwiched in between the flap and the outer body piece, and centre it across one top short edge. I'll just measure that. Yeah. Put an extra clip in. Now, if you're making this without the flap, the only thing you need to do is lay your strap piece onto the back, directly onto the back. Just spread that out as you did with the flap. Just spread it out and attach it with clips to the top and ignore the flap completely. So we've attached that, and now I'm going to grab one of my lining pieces and I'm going to lay that face down on top. So there's my strap and flap underneath. You've got your popper facing upwards, straps in the middle, lining face down on top. I'm going to match up those short edges at the top where the flap is and clip that into place. You can of course baste that flap on before you start if you wish. There we go, just make sure it's all nice and aligned. And then we've got a nice sandwich of everything, and I'm going to stitch across that top edge with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. There we go. And then I'm going to take my other 2 remaining pieces of outer and lining, and I'm going to lay those face down. So with your magnetic clasp towards the top, we're just going to stitch this top edge again. So face down, right side's facing, clip that top edge, clasp to top, and I'm going to stitch across that top edge at 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch too. Trim up. And now I'm going to take those to the ironing board and I'm going to press them with the seams open. So that's both my seams pressed open. I'm just going to trim up the corners of those seams, just on the seam allowance there. It's just reducing bulk. The more we can reduce bulk, the flatter we can get the end result. Just taking the corners off. And now I'll open that again. And you can leave it as it is, or you can top stitch it, but we have to top stitch it open. So we're just going to top stitch on the outer, not on the lining. So keeping that seam allowance open on the first one, take that to the machine and just stitch across 1/8 of an inch, 3mm from the edge. So there's our first one. You can see it's literally just on the outer fabric, not on the lining. And that's held that seam allowance open as well. Now on the other one where you have your flap, we're going to stitch across the outer fabric. We're not including the flap and strap. It's literally just the outer fabric, and we hold that seam allowance back inside. So you'll see that the seam allowances of your strap and flap can be caught within that top stitching, but you don't want to catch the strap and flap on the right side. There we go. So you see it's top stitched along there. That's held down that seam allowance on the back, but we haven't held that down, that flap contraption. Trim up. Now, I would say we're way more than halfway finished already, so the only decent thing to do is to have a good British tea break at this point. So I hope nobody had any wine at this point, because obviously it's not a long enough pattern to involve wine. Maybe on a bigger one. So while you were all enjoying yourself and having a tea break, I was over at the ironing board and I just pressed up a hem on the lining. So just a 1cm hem on the short edge of both pieces of the lining fabric. But I'll open that up again. We're not going to stitch that. That's just to help us achieve a nice even finish at the end when we close the turning gap. So we want to now join these together. So let's place them with right sides facing, body to body, lining to lining. And I'm going to clip that all the way around, matching up all the edges. Make sure that that seam, where the two seams are in the middle, make sure those seams match up exactly. That's more important than any point at all. So make sure they'll line exactly on top of each other to give you a nice finish. Same on the other side. Carry on clipping. Open up those seams at the bottom edge. We don't want to stitch those up at the moment. So we're ready to take that to the machine and stitch it. And we're going to leave the bottom short edge of the lining open. So I'm going to stitch from the bottom of the lining all the way up to the top, across and back down again, leaving that bottom short edge of lining open. And we're going to use the 1cm seam allowance. If you're feeling a bit of a bump, move that out of the way. That's just your flap and strap underneath. But you can push it to the side. I've got a really wide foot, you probably won't notice it, but because I'm using it's an AccuFeed system, it's actually a really wide foot. The usual applies. It's just like a bag. Your lining could do with being the teeniest bit smaller, so there's no bagginess inside, but really on something this small it's just an absolute fraction. So we're only talking an eighth of an inch, if that, a couple of millimeters. Make your seam allowance slightly larger when you're stitching onto the lining, but it's not essential, so don't worry about it. Back tack beginning and end, trim up, and then we're just going to trim the corners, and then we can turn that through. Now there is another small option here. I'll show you this first. So we're trimming, it's not, you don't have to worry too much about the seams themselves, but just when you get into those corners where you're going to be turning the lining into the body, you want to snip as close to the stitching as possible, and that's what's going to give you a nice flat look at the end. See how close I've trimmed to the seam there. And then clip the corners at the bottom. I usually do 3 clips. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So it's right into the stitch in there. Trim up the other side. And again, nicely into that seam at the top, nice and tight. Back down the lining. There we go. So that's trimmed, and we're ready to turn that through. But there is a little option here if you want to really style it out and show off. The case is a flat case, but you can put teeny box corners into it if you want. So if you want to do that, they're only 1/2 inch, and you only do it on the outer. You don't need to do it on the lining at all, because it really is just for show. So all we'd do is open that out at the bottom and make a little box corner here. So I usually turn it into a kite shape. This really is showing off, honestly. You don't need to do it at all. But if you do want to do it, flatten it into a kite shape. So all your seams are lying on top of each other, whichever way you fold it. And draw a 1/2 inch line straight across the corner here. And just sew, sorry, I haven't measured that, I'm just showing you, and just stitch across that, and then snip off the edge, just that corner. But as I say, that is just an option, it's just an additional alternative. You don't have to do it at all, so we're not going to do that today. So we're ready to turn that through. So pull the outer outside the lining, and use a very blunt tool just to push those corners out. Don't be pushing scissors out the corner, anybody. So if you've trimmed those nicely, you should be able to get a nice sharp edge on the corners. I mean, again, you could stitch rounded corners into them too, just as another option. There we go. And then I'm going to take that to the ironing board and press it. And remember, we pressed a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch hem on the top of that to help us close the turning gap. So just keep that folded in and press that nicely again. And that should all line up. So I've pressed that, looking beautiful, flat, nice clean edges. All that remains to do is to close our closing gap on the lining. So all neatly pressed in. Your hem is already turned up inside. And I'm just going to stitch across that, edge stitch it 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil from the edge. Backstitch beginning and end of every seam, snip after every seam. It will give you a much better finish, and then all we need to do is tuck that lining inside. Grab a hand sanitizer bottle, whether it's the round one or the flat one. Anything up to about 60 ml will fit in there. You can just steam the top edges as well if you wish. Drop that in. And there we go. Our beautiful hand sanitizer pod. So that's our tutorial complete. I really hope you enjoyed making it with me. It is loads of fun and I hope you're going to make lots of them. So just a few alternatives here for you if you want to make in different sizes. This pattern fits a bottle up to 4 inches high. So if you have a bottle that's 5 inches high and you want to carry that around, so I've got one here, it's slightly longer. I mean, you can just make that without the flap. It's dead simple to do. As explained in the video, literally without the flap, you can just have it as the drop-in holder and that will actually fit taller bottles in anyway. But if you want it with the flap and you want to make it an inch taller, then that's also no problem at all. Just take your pattern piece A, and as I say, this is for a 4-inch height bottle. If you want to fit a 5-inch high bottle in, just extend pattern piece A in length by 1 inch and that will give you the height for a 5-inch bottle. So just follow that. If it's 6 inches, add 2 inches on. So as I say, that's for a 4-inch. If you've got a wider bottle and it won't fit in, again, you can just extend pattern piece A in the width. So you can add 1 inch on the width just on pattern piece A. Your flap will still fit, it'll be fine. That's all you need to do is adjust that pattern piece A. I've made it that way so it's really simple for you to do. It's also great for lots of other things. I found it's really handy for my glasses. So if you want for your spectacles, just add 2 inches to the pattern and that in the length, and that will fit your glasses. Sorry, not sunglasses, your spectacles. Sunglasses tend to be a bit chunkier. You'd have to add a little onto the width as well if you wanted it for your sunglasses. But again, easy to do. If you want it shorter to hold headphones or cards and money or even USB sticks, just reduce the length of pattern piece A by 1 inch and that'll do it. Other things you can do is you can add a pocket to the front or the back by just literally hemming a piece of fabric the same width, so make it half the depth of piece A and just add that to the front at the bottom when you're stitching it together, so that can give you a pocket extra on the front or the back. If you want to make it as a lanyard, which is also really handy, then you can extend the strap to 38 inches. So keep the width, extend the length of it to 38 inches. Just make up in the same way and attach it just in the same way as you did previously, and that will give you a lovely lanyard. I can't say it now, a lanyard length. So you could even add 1 inch on length and on width and use it for your phone, and that would be really handy. I mean, that's great. That'd be great for a man as well. Not just for my Sanitizer, but great to hang from men's trousers with the phones in while they're out and about. So I hope you enjoyed our tutorial today. I hope you're going to make loads of them. Do subscribe to my channel and do join up to the Facebook sewing group. Lots of fun in there. And what are you waiting for? Go sew!